This is Outnumbered, and I'm Melissa Francis. Here today is Fox Business host Dagan McDowell, host of Kennedy and the Fox Business Network Kennedy, syndicated radio host and Fox News contributor Leslie Marshall, and joining us today, former Utah Congressman and Fox News contributor Jason Chaffetz. And Jason, let me start with you, because all through the Democratic convention, the Democrats were silent on all of the violence that's going on in major cities. And it was sort of like, if we don't, it's not going on, it's not a big deal. These are isolated incidents that are being hyped up on television. Now they have made a very strong change in tact. And we saw it last week, even with Democrats that were out on talk shows and the like, with new talking points saying, this is Donald Trump's America. Do you feel safe in Donald Trump's America? He's the one that is responsible for this. I don't think they necessarily blame either national candidate. You sort of look at it and think local law enforcement, local mayors, for whatever reason, let things get out of control. And then it's really hard to get them back under control once you've lost that in your city. Isn't that what's going on, Leslie?
I think what's going on, quite frankly, is radical elements on both the left and the right. And I think that local and national leaders have to, as many have, call this out. But the bigger problem, Melissa, is the bigger problem, which is the underlying problem and reason this occurs, which in the beginning is what people were protesting about. It is the injustice. It is the systemic racism. And this division in our country plays into politics, as we see in the polls, and it certainly plays into the way people are reacting in various cities. Look, I know people say, oh, this is because the Democrats in charge here, Democrats in charge here. I say bull on that. Maybe we can point to those cities now, and because there is some Democratic leadership in some of these cities, but we certainly have seen violence, whether a person is a Democrat or a Republican who is a mayor of a city, a governor of a state, or even president. I'll agree with Kennedy. Look, if you reelect Donald Trump, this isn't going to disappear overnight. And if you elect Joe Biden, this isn't going to disappear overnight. But we do need leadership to come up with something that addresses the underlying problem. Otherwise, this is not going to stop for a very long time, because every time something happens with regard to the police, something happens with regard to an African-American as a victim, we see more anger and more protest.
Hang on. Leslie, in which Republican city, where is there a Republican mayor where they're having riots right now? Which city is that?
No, not right. I said not right now. Yes, they are Democratic mayors and governors. Oh. But in the past, we've seen violence in our nation in cities or states that have either a Democrat or Republican, which is why I don't blame the party in power. The individuals that are acting left or right violently are to blame.
Intelligence Chief John Ratcliffe blaming those leaks for his decision to cut back on in-person election security briefings to Congress in favor of written reports. House Intel Chair Adam Schiff denying that he or his staff leaked anything, saying that the lack of oral briefings could lead to the suppression of critical information. Leslie, also, Kennedy listed North Korea and China as well. What about Iran? Iran's on the radar, too.
Definitely. Look, here to me, this is absolutely ridiculous, because a written report, although to Melissa's point, I agree with her 100%, is more difficult to leak, it still can be leaked. Here's the problem that I have as a taxpayer and a constituent. Whether you're a Democrat or Republican, you've elected officials to represent you, and your representation in Congress should be able to ask questions, whether it's about Russia or China or Iran or North Korea, from these briefings. That you cannot do when something's in writing. So this slap on the hand to Adam Schiff, if that's who they are alleging, even though they said members, plural, of Congress, it's really punishing the American people, because we need our representatives to be able to ask specific questions so that they have more knowledge than what's just there on the written page that also could be leaked.
Hogan Gidley accusing the media of being complicit in the rise in violence in several cities across the country, saying they ignored it until Joe Biden finally mentioned it. Now, meantime, CNN editor-at-large Chris Cillizza has faced criticism on social media for this tweet. Quote, Trump's efforts to label what is happening in major cities as riots speaks at least somewhat to his desperation, politically speaking, at the moment. In his newsletter, he writes that the president senses, quote, the race is slipping from him, and has to cling on to the, quote, events following the shooting of Jacob Blake in Kenosha earlier this month as a sign not of peaceful protest, but of radical leftists rioting and destroying cities. So Leslie, how do you define riot?
Oh, certainly if you have people who are being violent with one another, certainly if you have people who are attacking one another, yes, that's a riot. If you have stealing from a store, that's looting, absolutely. But if you're protesting peacefully, that doesn't make you a rioter if you are not a part of the rioting. So there are definitely some gray areas. And left or right in an election year, you're going to have people, paint it whether with rose-colored glasses or paint it with doom and gloom, and I can save you from this. Look, I want to talk in facts. And the thing that bothered me about what Hogan said was that for 90 days, the mainstream media didn't cover this. So I said, did they? So let's take a look. New York Times, back in May. CNN, ABC, CBS, NBC, back in May, in June, in July. They did. Look, if it bleeds, it leads is an adage that didn't start in 2020 in the media. Sadly, we as Americans like to read, like to watch, like to hear about more of the destruction than we do the peaceful protest. That's sad, but that's true. And because media is a business and they work in the supply and demand economics 101, they're giving people what they want to see and what they want to hear. So I totally disagree that it was after Joe Biden said something about
now,
this.
Now
quite
conveniently,
frankly, they've been covering this before.
It is conversation misleading, saying Meadows himself did not break down the cost of his offer either. Last week, Pelosi told reporters that for now, she doesn't plan to give any more ground on the relief package. Jason, when you look at this negotiation and the way that it's going around and around in circles, I wonder if neither side wants to get this done. If Republicans don't want to give more relief because they don't want to pay people to stay home and not work, they want to get things open and get people out there. If Democrats don't want to get this going because they kind of want to keep things stalled before the election. Is either side, in your opinion, really trying to get something done here? Yeah, Leslie, what about that?
Look, Texas and Florida are red states that need the state aid. And I have to say, Melissa, you said that terrible four-letter word math, but from where I stand, she's come down. Democrats have come down over $1 trillion. And Jason, I heard her clearly in the past talk about the $600 a week that would continue for the American people with unemployment assistance, additional unemployment assistance through the end of the year, as opposed to what Republicans are proposing, which is half. And in addition, that money for the states. And that's not just for blue states. That's for states across the board who certainly need aid from the federal government to assist with the essential workers, such as first responders and healthcare workers. So I'm hearing something I guess everyone else isn't.
Leslie, it's all the other things that she also puts in the bill. She puts in there things like for vote harvesting and how they conduct voting and money for illegal immigrants and all these other things that she doesn't want to talk about. Put forward a clean bill and make a case for it, and it probably will pass. But she's got it larded up with all these things that have absolutely nothing to do with COVID relief. Nothing.
Jason, I will say that I agree with you rarely, but I do agree with you on left or right, putting lard in a bill and additional line items. I'm not in favor of that. Just give the American people in these states what they need.
Yeah.
Intelligence Chief John Radcliffe says that he's been coordinating with U.S. Attorney John Durham in his investigation of the investigators and plans to soon declassify more documents on the Trump-Russia probe. I think, Leslie, that Adam Schiff actually said that the evidence of Russia collusion with President Trump was in plain sight even after the Mueller report was released. But what do you expect from Durham and Radcliffe?
Well, I expect it's an election year. I agree with Jason again. This is scary. Twice in one show, Jason. Look, this should have been done a year ago, but it's not. Why? Come on. We have a general election in November. I mean, and technically their boss is up for keeping or losing his job. I'm sorry, but this just doesn't smell very good, especially with the timing. And I would also agree with Melissa, though, if you're going to make the promise, again, left or right, if you're going to make the promise, you got to put it forth because the American people aren't stupid.